Hello, madam. What are you doing here? It's so cold here.
The night the storm tried to steal 2 lives, a 7-year-old boy refused to let it. The wind screamed through downtown like something alive. Snow slammed against glass windows, against street signs, against anything that dared stand in its path. At 9 degrees Fahrenheit, the cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. The kind of cold that stiffens fingers in minutes. The kind that turns breath into smoke and hope into something fragile. Most people were inside. Most people were safe. But not everyone. A black SUV moved slowly through the storm-covered streets, headlights cutting through thick sheets of white. Inside sat Ethan Cole, 38 years old, founder and CEO of Coltech Industries. A man whose name appeared in business magazines. A man who could buy almost anything. Except more time. 12 months earlier, Ethan had buried his wife. Rachel. Her laughter used to fill their home. Now silence lived there instead. Beside him in the passenger seat sat his 7-year-old son, Liam, bundled in a thick winter coat, small fingers wrapped around a cup of hot chocolate from their favorite cafe. His cheeks were pink from the cold, his brown eyes thoughtful, older than they should be. "Daddy," Liam's voice was soft, almost lost beneath the howl of the wind. Ethan glanced over, forcing a smile. "Yeah, buddy." Liam didn't answer immediately. He was staring out the window. And then he whispered, "Is that a person?" Ethan's heart tightened before his eyes, even followed Liam's gaze. On the sidewalk, near the boarded entrance of an abandoned building, a figure sat slumped against the brick wall. Snow had already begun collecting on her shoulders. She was hunched over something small, shielding it. No, not something. Someone. A child. Ethan slowed the car. The storm raged louder, as if warning him to keep driving, to mind his business, to protect what was his. He could. He should. But then he looked at Liam. The boy's hot chocolate trembled in his small hands, not from the cold. From fear. "Daddy, they look cold." It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a demand. It was something heavier. Compassion. And suddenly, Ethan remembered another winter night years ago, when Rachel had insisted they pull over to help a stranded driver. "It costs nothing to be kind," she had said back then. And now she wasn't here to say it. So maybe Liam was. Ethan pulled over. The tires crunched against ice as the SUV stopped. The heater hummed inside, warm and safe. Outside, survival was a question mark. "Stay in the car," Ethan said instinctively. But Liam shook his head. "No," he whispered, "we can't leave them." There was something in his son's voice, something steady, something brave. And Ethan realized something that terrified him. His little boy had just made a decision that could change all their lives. Together, they stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a slap, sharp, immediate, ruthless. The woman looked up at the sound of approaching footsteps. Her eyes were red, her lips pale and cracked. Fear flashed across her face. She tightened her grip around the little girl pressed into her chest. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, voice trembling. "We're not begging. The shelter opens in the morning. We just needed somewhere to wait." Her pride was still intact. Even now. Ethan crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "My name is Ethan," he said gently. "This is my son, Liam. What's your name?" The woman hesitated. "Maya." "And her?" She looked down at the small figure wrapped in thin blankets. The little girl's lips were blue at the edges. "Ella." Liam stepped closer before Ethan could stop him. "She looks really cold," he said softly. Maya swallowed hard. "We'll be okay." But they wouldn't be. Not in this weather. Not at 9 degrees. Not with a 5-year-old whose tiny hands weren't even inside gloves. Ethan felt something twist inside him. He was a man used to solving problems with contracts and numbers. But this wasn't business. This was human. "Please," Ethan said calmly, extending his hand. "Come with us just for tonight, somewhere warm." Maya stared at him, as if he had offered her something impossible. "You don't even know us." Ethan gave a small, tired smile. "I know you're a mother trying to protect your daughter." A long pause. The wind howled between them. And then Maya made the hardest decision a proud person can make. She accepted help. Ethan removed his own coat and wrapped it around little Ella, who leaned into him immediately, too exhausted to resist. Liam held Maya's hand as they walked back toward the SUV. 4 figures against the storm. One decision already rewriting the night. Inside the car, warmth returned slowly. The heater hummed, windows fogged, Ella's tiny body stopped shaking. And Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Back at Ethan's home, a modern glass-fronted house glowing against the snow, the fireplace was already lit by automatic timers. Warm light spilled across hardwood floors. Blankets, soft furniture, safety. Liam rushed to grab more blankets. Ethan made hot chocolate. Maya and Ella sat stiffly at the edge of the couch, like guests who weren't sure they were allowed to relax. Ella took one sip of the hot chocolate and burst into quiet tears. The kind that come when you finally feel safe. Ethan turned away slightly, blinking hard. Because for a second, he saw Rachel again. He heard her voice. "This is what matters, Ethan." But as the storm worsened outside, as the night deepened, as Maya slowly began sharing fragments of how she had fled an abusive marriage, how she had lost her job, how every attempt to rebuild had collapsed, Ethan didn't notice something else. Across the street, a car had been parked for several minutes, its engine running, its headlights off, watching. And inside that car, someone recognized Maya. And they were not there to offer kindness. The storm outside was only the beginning. And Ethan had no idea that by opening his door he may have just invited danger inside his life. What do you think is about to happen next? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe. I worked incredibly hard to bring you this one, and your support means the world. The snow kept falling. And across the street, the engine of that parked car finally shut off. The storm didn't end that night. It only buried the city deeper. By morning, snow had swallowed the sidewalks, covered parked cars halfway up their doors, and turned downtown into a frozen maze of silence. News channels warned people to stay inside. Emergency services were overwhelmed. Shelters were at capacity. Inside Ethan Cole's home, however, warmth wrapped around everything. But warmth doesn't erase fear. It only softens it enough to feel it fully. Maya hadn't slept. She had tried. Ethan had insisted she and Ella take the guest bedroom upstairs, soft gray walls, fresh linen sheets, a view of snow-coated trees. The kind of room Maya once imagined raising her daughter in. Instead, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Safe, but unsettled, because safety felt temporary. Ella, on the other hand, had slept like someone rescued from drowning. Down the hall, Liam was awake early. He stood quietly outside the guest room, holding something in his hands. When Maya opened the door, startled at first, she found him there. He held out a small stuffed bear. "It was my mom's favorite," he said softly. "She said bears are brave because they protect their families." Maya's throat tightened. "That's very kind of you." Liam looked past her at Ella sleeping peacefully. "Is she scared a lot?" Maya didn't know how to answer that without breaking. "Yes," she whispered. Liam nodded slowly, as if processing something much bigger than his years. "I'll protect her," he said simply. Maya had to turn away so he wouldn't see the tears forming. Downstairs, Ethan stood in his kitchen reviewing emails on his tablet. Even during a snowstorm, a CEO's phone never slept. Board members asking about quarterly performance. Investors demanding updates. But another email caught his eye. Security alert, unidentified vehicle recorded outside residence, 11:43 p.m. Ethan frowned. He opened the security feed footage from the previous night. There it was. A dark sedan parked across the street. Engine idling. Headlights off. For 12 minutes. Watching. His jaw tightened. Coincidence? Or something else? He glanced toward the staircase. Toward the guest room. Toward the decision he made. And for the first time since bringing Maya inside, a seed of doubt entered his mind. What if he had risked more than he realized? Later that morning, the atmosphere lightened slightly. Liam and Ella sat on the living room floor building towers out of wooden blocks. Ella giggled, a small, fragile sound like it wasn't used often. Maya watched from the couch. Her daughter hadn't laughed like that in months. Ethan approached quietly. "She seems comfortable," he said. Maya nodded. "She hasn't had a friend in a long time." Ethan studied her. "You don't have to explain everything at once, but if there's someone looking for you, I need to know." Maya stiffened. There it was. The unspoken question. She took a slow breath. "My husband, ex-husband," she corrected. "Daniel, he didn't take it well when I left." Ethan remained silent, letting her speak. "He controlled everything. Money, friends, where I worked. When I finally left, I thought that was the hard part." She gave a hollow laugh. "It was." Ethan felt a quiet anger building. "Has he threatened you?" Maya hesitated too long. And that hesitation said enough. "He's powerful in his own way," she whispered. "Not rich like you, but connected. He doesn't like losing." Ethan's mind immediately replayed the parked car. "You think he'd look for you?" Maya looked at her daughter, laughing on the floor. "Yes." That afternoon, Ethan made calls. Discreet ones. He arranged temporary housing at a secure apartment complex owned by one of his subsidiaries. He contacted a lawyer he trusted. He scheduled medical checkups for Ella. He moved quickly. Decisively. But this wasn't business. And he wasn't just solving a problem. He was stepping into someone else's war. Meanwhile, outside the city, a different conversation was unfolding. Daniel Hayes stared at his phone screen, paused security footage from downtown. He had contacts everywhere. A friend in private security had tipped him off. "Your wife was picked up by some rich guy in a black SUV." Daniel's jaw flexed. "Rich guy?" "Of course." He zoomed in on the vehicle's license plate. Then ran it. Ethan Cole. CEO. Wealthy. Widower. A slow, dangerous smile formed. "You think money makes you untouchable," Daniel muttered. This wasn't about love. This was about control. And control was something Daniel never surrendered. Back at Ethan's home, tension grew quietly. That evening, as the storm calmed slightly, Ethan's head of corporate security called. "Sir, we've had unusual activity around your property before. Nothing direct. But this morning, a man tried accessing public records connected to your address." "Name?" "Daniel Hayes." Ethan's chest went cold. The threat was no longer abstract. It had a name. And it was moving closer. That night, Maya stood near the fireplace, watching snow fall. "You don't have to get involved," she said without turning around. Ethan stepped beside her. I already am. She looked at him then, really looked at him. Why, she asked quietly, you don't owe me anything. Ethan stared into the flames. Because someone once told me it costs nothing to be kind. He swallowed. And because my son is watching. Upstairs, Liam was teaching Ella how to fold paper into little snowflakes. Even if they tear, he explained, you can make new ones. Simple words. Deep truth. But just as the house began to feel almost peaceful, a loud knock echoed at the front door. Not gentle. Not polite. Demanding. Everyone froze. Ethan's eyes met Maya's. Her face drained of color. Another knock. Harder. Then a voice from outside. I know you're in there, Maya. The sound of that voice was enough to shatter the warmth in the room. Daniel. Liam looked down from the staircase. Daddy. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. Security cameras showed one man at the door. But experience told him men like Daniel rarely came alone. The knocking turned into pounding. Open the door. Ella began to cry upstairs. Maya trembled visibly. This is my fault, she whispered. Ethan's voice hardened, calm, controlled, protective. No. He walked toward the door but stopped short of opening it. This is private property, he called out firmly. You need to leave. Daniel laughed, a sharp, unsettling sound. You think you can hide her. You have no idea what you're getting into. And then, sirens. Blue and red lights reflected across snow. Ethan had pressed the silent security alert on his phone moments earlier. Police vehicles approached. Daniel stepped back, raising his hand slightly in mock surrender. This isn't over, he shouted before retreating toward his car. He left, but not defeated. Just delayed. Inside, silence hung heavy. The storm outside had weakened. But the real storm had just begun. Maya collapsed into a chair, shaking. I can't keep running, she whispered. Ethan looked at his son at the top of the stairs. At Ella crying. At a house that once felt empty, now suddenly fragile. He had wanted to help. He had. But helping had consequences. And now those consequences were standing at his gate. What if Daniel didn't stop at threats? What if this became dangerous for Liam? For everyone. Ethan had faced hostile takeovers, corporate sabotage, billion-dollar risks. But this felt personal. And personal was far more unpredictable. That night, long after everyone slept, Ethan stood alone in his home office. Security footage replayed on his screen. Daniel's face. His voice. His promise. This isn't over. Ethan leaned back slowly. He could walk away. Arrange housing far from here. Pay for protection. Distance himself. Or he could stand his ground. Protect them. And risk everything. The question was no longer whether he could afford to help. It was whether he could afford not to. If you were in this situation, what would you do? Comment below. Because the next move Ethan makes will determine whether this story becomes one of kindness or one of consequences. The difference between kindness and recklessness is sometimes only visible after damage is done. 3 days after Daniel showed up at the house, the storm finally cleared. The sky returned pale blue, almost innocent. But inside Ethan Cole's world, pressure was building. Not from snow, from scrutiny. It started quietly. A board member requested an emergency meeting. Then another. Then headlines began circulating online. Coltech CEO involved in domestic dispute. Tech billionaire shelters mysterious woman. Security incident reported. The media machine didn't need facts. It needed speculation. And someone had fed it. Ethan stood in the glass-walled conference room at Coltech headquarters, staring at the skyline. Below, traffic moved like nothing had happened. Behind him, voices whispered, "Investors are nervous. This could impact stock value. We need a statement." Ethan turned slowly. "This is a private matter." One board member leaned forward. "When police show up at your residence, it becomes a public one." Another added carefully, "If this woman's husband claims interference, it could become legal." Ethan's jaw tightened. Interference. As if protecting a mother and child was a hostile act. "Are we seriously debating the optics of helping someone?" Ethan asked, voice controlled but edged with steel. Silence. Because yes, they were. This wasn't just about kindness anymore. It was about power. And Daniel had realized something Ethan hadn't. You don't attack a man like Ethan Cole directly. You attack his reputation. Meanwhile, at the temporary apartment Ethan arranged, Maya sat at the small dining table reviewing paperwork from the lawyer. Protective order filings. Custody documentation. Statements. Her hands trembled slightly. She hated that Ethan was being pulled into this. Hated that Liam and Ella's laughter was now shadowed by tension. Ella sat nearby coloring. Liam had insisted on coming over after school. "I'm her bodyguard," he declared seriously. But children feel what adults try to hide. And Ella had started asking questions. "Is Daddy mad?" Maya swallowed hard. "Yes," she answered honestly. "But he doesn't get to hurt us anymore." She hoped that was true. That evening, Ethan received a call that made his stomach drop. "Sir," his head of security said, voice tight, "Daniel Hayes filed a complaint this afternoon." "For what?" "Alleging that you're coercing his wife, that you're using financial influence to keep her away." Ethan laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "That's absurd." "It doesn't matter. It creates noise, and he's requesting a court review of temporary custody." The air seemed to thin. He wasn't just threatening Maya anymore. He was trying to take Ella. Using the system. Weaponizing it. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. This wasn't a desperate man. This was a calculating one. That night, Maya came to Ethan's house to talk. Not as someone seeking help, but as someone ready to walk away. "I can't let this destroy your life," she said, standing in the living room that had once felt warm and safe. "It won't," Ethan replied firmly. "You don't know that," she whispered. "He's manipulative if he convinces a judge that I'm unstable." "You're not unstable." "You don't know that either," she snapped suddenly, the strain finally cracking through. Silence fell. Maya's breathing quickened. "I stayed longer than I should have," she admitted, tears forming. "I made excuses for him. I let Ella see things she never should have seen." Ethan stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. "That doesn't make you weak. It makes me guilty." Her voice broke. And for the first time, Ethan saw not just a struggling mother, but a woman drowning in self-blame. "I don't deserve your help," she whispered. Ethan's response was quiet. "That's not how kindness works." Upstairs, Liam and Ella sat on the bedroom floor again. But tonight, they weren't building towers. They were listening. Through the vent, voices carried faintly. "Are they fighting?" Ella asked. Liam shook his head, though he wasn't sure. "My dad doesn't yell," he said confidently. But he remembered the way his dad used to sit alone at night after his mom died. Quiet. Heavy. He didn't want that again. "I don't want to leave," Ella said suddenly. Liam's chest tightened. "You won't." But neither of them, knew how promises worked in adult wars. The breaking point came the next morning. Ethan arrived at the office to find reporters outside. Microphones, cameras, questions shouted the moment he stepped out of the car. "Mr. Cole, are you interfering in a custody dispute? Are you financially manipulating a vulnerable woman? Is this affecting Coltech shareholders?" He didn't respond. He walked through them. But inside, something was shifting. Daniel wasn't just attacking privately. He was dismantling everything publicly. And then came the real blow. An emergency court hearing was scheduled within 72 hours. If Maya couldn't prove stability, Daniel could be granted temporary custody until a full investigation. Which meant Ella could be taken, even if only temporarily, even if unfairly. For a child who had already endured so much, temporary could feel permanent. That evening, Maya sat in Ethan's kitchen, staring at the hearing notice. "I can't win," she whispered. Ethan leaned forward. "You can. He has records. He's going to bring up the time I had a panic attack at work, the weeks I couldn't pay rent, the shelter stays. He'll paint me as unstable. Those are consequences of leaving him. The court won't care." Her voice wasn't dramatic. It was defeated. And that scared Ethan more than Daniel ever could. Because hopeless people stop fighting. And then, another truth surfaced. Something Maya hadn't told him. "There's something else," she said quietly. Ethan looked up. "I never filed a police report when I left." "Why?" "Because he said if I did, he'd make sure I'd never see Ella again." The room fell silent. No documentation. No official record of abuse. Just her word against his. Daniel had planned this carefully. He hadn't just controlled her life. He had erased evidence of his cruelty. Ethan's hands curled into fists. "Why didn't you tell me?" Maya looked ashamed. "Because I didn't want you to see me as stupid." The words hit hard. Ethan stood and walked to the window. Snow was melting now, dripping from rooftops. Slow. Inevitable. He had stepped into this, believing money and influence could fix it. But this wasn't a business acquisition. It was a legal maze designed to protect manipulators who knew how to appear calm. Daniel wasn't raging anymore. He was smiling, waiting. That night, something happened that shattered whatever illusion of control remained. The security system alarm went off at the apartment complex. Ethan's phone lit up instantly. Motion detected, parking garage level B. He opened the live feed. Daniel's car, parked in the visitor section. Maya's car was 3 rows away. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. He called her immediately. "Maya, where are you?" "In the apartment." "Why?" "Stay inside, lock the door." She froze. "Is he here?" "Yes." Seconds felt like minutes. Security guards approached Daniel's vehicle on camera. Daniel stepped out calmly, hands visible, smiling, as if he had every right to be there. "I'm just here to see my daughter," he said to the guards. He wasn't breaking laws. He was bending them. Just enough. And as the guards escorted him out, Daniel looked directly at the camera, at Ethan, and mouthed 3 words. "She's mine." Inside the apartment, Maya was shaking. "I can't do this," she whispered. Ethan arrived 20 minutes later. Liam had insisted on coming. "I'm not staying behind," he said firmly. When they entered, Ella ran into Liam's arms. "I saw his car," she whispered. And that's when Ethan realized. This wasn't just about legal threats. Daniel was psychologically cornering them. making Maya doubt herself, making Ella afraid, and making Ethan question whether his involvement was helping or escalating everything. For the first time since that freezing night, hope felt thin, fragile, like ice about to crack. Maya sat on the couch, head in her hands. "What if he wins?" she whispered. No one answered, because no one could promise he wouldn't. And outside, the melting snow dripped steadily from rooftops. Like a countdown. Did this twist surprise you? Let me know your thoughts. Because in 72 hours, a judge would decide whether kindness was enough, or whether power would win. Sometimes the most powerful act of kindness isn't opening your door. It's refusing to close it when things get hard. The courthouse felt colder than the winter storm ever had. Gray marble floors, high ceilings, echoes of footsteps and quiet tension. The kind of building where decisions changed lives in under 15 minutes. Maya sat on a wooden bench, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were pale. Ella sat beside her, clutching the small stuffed bear Liam had given her. Across the hallway, Daniel stood in a tailored coat, composed, confident. He looked like a man who had already rehearsed his victory. Ethan stood beside Maya, not in front of her, not shielding her but beside her. "Equal. Steady. Remember," he said quietly, "you're not fighting him, you're protecting her." Maya nodded, but fear still lingered in her eyes. The courtroom doors opened, and everything changed. Daniel's attorney spoke first. Measured tone, polished language. He painted Daniel as a concerned father, trying to reconnect with his daughter after a misunderstanding spiraled out of control. Then he painted Maya as unstable, unemployed, emotionally fragile, unable to provide a consistent environment. Every word felt like a blade. Maya's hands trembled. Ella squeezed her fingers. Then it was Maya's lawyer's turn, the one Ethan had quietly arranged. But instead of theatrics, he presented truth. Documented shelter stays. Medical reports from Ella's recent checkup showing anxiety indicators consistent with exposure to domestic conflict. Character statements. One from a former coworker, one from a neighbor, and then one from Ethan. Not about abuse, not about Daniel, but about Maya. "She is not a victim," the statement read aloud. "She is a mother who made an impossible choice to protect her child. Stability is not defined by square footage. It is defined by safety." The courtroom fell quiet. Daniel shifted in his seat. But the real moment came unexpectedly. The judge asked gently, "Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on behalf of Ms. Hayes?" There was a pause. And then, a small voice. "I do." Every head turned. "Liam." Ethan's heart stopped. He hadn't known his son had written anything. The judge looked surprised but allowed it. Liam walked forward, holding a folded piece of paper in both hands. He looked tiny in that massive room. But his voice did not shake. "My name is Liam Cole," he began. "I'm 7. A few quiet smiles in the courtroom. He continued. "My mom died last year, and when she did, my dad was really sad, but he still made me pancakes every Saturday, even when he didn't feel like smiling." Ethan's chest tightened. Liam looked at Maya. "And Miss Maya makes Ella smile like that, even when she's scared. I've seen it." He swallowed. "I know grown-ups think kids don't understand things, but we do. Ella feels safe with her mom, and feeling safe is more important than anything." Silence. Heavy. Sacred. The judge leaned back slowly. Daniel's confident posture cracked slightly for the first time. Because this wasn't about wealth, or influence, or polished arguments. It was about a child recognizing safety and saying it out loud. The ruling came an hour later. Temporary custody denied. Supervised visitation only. Pending full investigation into abuse claims. Daniel's jaw tightened as the decision was read. He stood, eyes cold, but said nothing. For the first time, he had been challenged publicly and lost. Maya didn't cry immediately. She exhaled, like someone who had been underwater too long. Then she bent down and hugged Ella so tightly the little girl giggled. Ethan looked at Liam. "You wrote that yourself?" Liam nodded. "You said once that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you do the right thing anyway." Ethan blinked hard. Rachel used to say that. Kindness wasn't weakness. It was courage. But redemption wasn't finished. Because healing isn't won in courtrooms. It's built in moments after. Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. Not dramatic. Not loud. But steady. Maya began working at Coltech's administrative office, not as charity, but as an employee who earned her place. She was efficient, detail-oriented, respected quickly, and for the first time in years, she felt capable instead of controlled. Ella started therapy, funded quietly by Ethan, never mentioned publicly. Liam attended some sessions too. Not because he was broken, but because grief leaves fingerprints even when you hide it well. The children grew closer. Laughter returned to Ethan's home, not forced, not temporary but organic. Snow melted completely. Spring approached. And one evening, something small yet powerful happened. Maya stood in Ethan's kitchen, sleeves rolled up, attempting to cook dinner. "I haven't cooked in a house like this before," she admitted. Ethan smiled faintly. "It's just a kitchen." She looked around. It used to feel impossible, being in a place like this. And now, she met his eyes. Now it just feels warm. There was no dramatic music. No sudden declarations. Just quiet understanding. Kindness had not created obligation. It had created dignity. Weeks later, Daniel attempted one more move. A private investigator tried digging into Ethan's past, hoping to uncover something scandalous. Nothing surfaced, because Ethan's kindness had never been a performance. It had been a choice, repeated daily. And when the full investigation concluded, evidence finally surfaced. A former neighbor of Maya's came forward with documented noise complaints and a hidden recording of one violent argument. Daniel's public image fractured. Court orders became permanent. Maya and Ella were legally protected. The storm had passed. For real this time. One evening, months later, the four of them sat in the backyard as the first summer breeze drifted through the air. Fireflies blinked. Liam and Ella chased them across the grass. Ethan watched Maya watching her daughter. There was peace in her expression now. Not perfect, not untouched, but earned. "I almost walked away," Maya admitted quietly. "When? The night he showed up at your door, I thought I was ruining your life." Ethan considered that. "You didn't ruin it." He looked at the children laughing. "You changed it." Maya's eyes softened. "I don't know how to repay you." Ethan shook his head. "You don't." He gestured toward Liam. "He repaid me the moment he refused to drive past you." Kindness had multiplied. One small decision. One stopped car. And everything shifted. Have you ever experienced kindness at the moment you needed it most? Share with us. Because sometimes, the greatest act of kindness is simply standing beside someone when the storm refuses to stop. And in Ethan's heart, for the first time since Rachel's death, something long frozen had begun to thaw. Some storms destroy, others reveal. The winter that began with freezing winds and fear ended in something no one could have predicted. Not a courtroom victory, not a headline correction, not even a romantic confession. It ended with healing. And healing is quieter than drama, but far more powerful. 6 months later, downtown looked completely different. The trees that once stood frozen and lifeless were now full of green. Sidewalk cafes were open again. Children ran past fountains. The same city that had nearly taken 2 lives under a snowstorm now shimmered under sunlight. Inside Coltech Industries, Maya walked confidently through the lobby, badge clipped neatly to her blazer. Employees greeted her by name. Not because of Ethan, but because she had earned respect. Her organizational systems had streamlined an entire department. Her calm under pressure had impressed senior managers. Her resilience had become visible in everything she touched. She was no longer surviving. She was rebuilding. And she was doing it on her own strength. Ethan watched from his office window as she crossed the courtyard with a small smile. He didn't see someone he had rescued. He saw someone who had rescued herself. Kindness hadn't saved Maya. It had simply given her space to stand. At home, things felt different too. The house no longer echoed. Laughter bounced off the walls. Liam and Ella had built a cardboard space station in the living room, complete with drawn control panels and emergency buttons. "We're protecting Earth," Liam announced seriously. Ella nodded, "From bad guys." Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "Sounds important." "It is," Liam replied. Then he added almost casually, "But real heroes just help people." The words lingered in the air. Real heroes just help people. Not for applause. Not for control. Not for reward. Just because it's right. That evening, they all sat around the dinner table, something that had once felt impossible. Maya reached for Ella's hand. "I have something to say," she began softly. Ella looked up. "I used to think being strong meant handling everything alone," Maya continued. "But I learned something." She glanced at Ethan. "Sometimes strength is letting someone help you." Ethan didn't interrupt. He understood something too. After Rachel died, he had tried to carry grief alone. He buried himself in work, in responsibilities, in control. But kindness doesn't only flow outward. Sometimes it returns. And when it does, you have to accept it. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, one in each bedroom down the hall, Ethan and Maya stood on the back porch. Summer air replaced winter frost. Crickets replaced howling wind. "Do you ever think about that night?" Maya asked. "All the time," Ethan admitted. She smiled faintly. "I almost didn't trust you. I almost kept driving." They both fell silent. 2 decisions. 2 moments balanced on instinct. One small voice in the passenger seat had changed everything. Maya turned to him. "You know what saved us that night?" Ethan thought she meant the coat, the house, the lawyer. But she shook her head. "Your son's heart." And Ethan felt it. The truth. Liam had seen what adults often look away from. Pain. And he refused to ignore it. A week later, something unexpected happened. Ethan received a letter at the office. Handwritten. From the local shelter downtown. The director explained that after news of the custody ruling spread, the real story, not the gossip, donations had increased. Volunteers had signed up. People had reached out offering temporary housing for families during winter emergencies. And at the bottom of the letter was a simple line. One act of kindness creates a chain reaction. Ethan read it twice. Then he drove home early. That evening, he gathered Liam and Ella in the living room. "I have a question," he said. Both children looked up. "What if we helped more families before winter comes again?" Ella's eyes widened, like with coats. "And food," Liam added quickly. "And maybe a place to stay," Ella whispered. Maya watched quietly. Ethan smiled. "We can start small." And that's exactly what they did. Coltech quietly funded a winter outreach initiative, not branded, not marketed, just practical. Warm clothing drives, emergency housing partnerships, support for single parents escaping abuse. Not because it improved stock value, but because someone had once needed help at 9 degrees Fahrenheit. And someone had stopped. Months passed. Seasons changed. Grief softened. Trust deepened. One Sunday afternoon, Ethan found himself in the kitchen flipping pancakes, just like he had every Saturday since Rachel passed. But this time, there were 4 plates on the table. Liam poured syrup carefully. Ella giggled as she tried to stack hers too high. Maya leaned against the counter, watching them. The house felt full. Not replaced. Not rewritten. But expanded. Rachel wasn't forgotten. She was honored in every kind decision made afterward. Ethan looked at his son. "You know," he said quietly, "that night you saved more than one family." Liam frowned slightly. "I just didn't want them to be cold." "Exactly. Kindness doesn't need complexity. It needs courage." As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, Ethan stood outside watching the sky turn orange and gold. He remembered the freezing night, the snow, the fear, the parked car across the street, and he realized something powerful. The storm hadn't come to destroy his life. It had come to reveal who he was becoming. A father who listened, a man who chose courage over convenience, a person who understood that wealth means nothing if it never warms anyone else. Inside, laughter echoed again, and Ethan turned toward it. Because that sound, that warmth, that connection, was the real victory. Kindness had not made his life easier. It had made it meaningful. And sometimes, meaning is the greatest rescue of all. What lesson did you take from this story? I'd love to read your comments. Because at the end of the day, remember this. You never know whose life you're changing when you decide not to look away.